Well, hey, welcome back, everyone. So, this will be a simple video. I posted this on Facebook, but I wanted to sort of give my thoughts on nationalism. I think there's nothing wrong. I don't know that there's anything wrong with a little bit of nationalism, but dogmatic nationalism, I think, is a bad idea. And this is my thoughts on nationalism. So, what is this current trend towards the desire for so-called nationalism? As you know, in recent years, nationalism has become a big, hot topic. Like, people all over the world are engaging in nationalism, and particularly those of the right-wing category seem to be extraordinarily into nationalism. To me, I follow the philosophies of Friedrich Nietzsche, that nationalism is poisonous, and I'll explain why. Now, before you crucify me for going against such a popular idea, let me say that I like living in this country. This is not to say, however, that I could not go to another country and enjoy living there as well. No doubt, they will have things that America excels at, whereas they do not. But the same applies vice versa. The other country may have things they excel at while America does not. The ability to see the bigger picture here isn't about globalism. I'm not naive enough to think humankind is mature enough to be able to create or sustain a Star Trek society, so to say. This isn't about economic systems either. I have to be very clear about that. So before you go spouting off about socialism, communism, capitalism, and fascism, this is about living in a place where freedoms are prioritized over restricting an individual's freedom. In other words, this is philosophical. Dogmatic nationalism can render one blind to wrongdoings of their nation, and should be able to reserve the right to question their nation's actions and policies. If you are so engulfed into your patriotism, you will no longer be able to see the forest for the trees. I think it would be wise to have an open mind about the fact that other countries have their shortcomings and triumphs as well, and the ability to understand that your happiness is not allocated to any specific region. That would be the sign of intelligence and an open mind. There might be some free world countries that seem less free than the one you currently live in, and at this point you must realize this is subjective. You know, one man's utopia is another man's dystopia. Now, I know many people say we must be patriotic to defend our country. And do others not feel the same for their country? If another country is in jeopardy, even if it is not your own, do you really want to see the entire country collapse on itself? I give you time to answer that question in your head. I should really hope that one, I should really hope that one is not devoid of that. I'm sorry. I should really hope that one is not devoid of humanity, and that the answer to the last question was no. Being proud of your country, I see as being warranted if said country has done something of a major accomplishment and is worthy of being proud of. In general, though, are we not complacent in where we live regardless of the country we live? I know regardless of the country we live in, many people who live in it criticize how it functions and runs. Is not constructive criticism healthy in the sense that it can make things better, or at least begin down the path of betterment, of growth? And change is inevitable. Is that not, in and of itself, a patriotic thing to do? To ask the country you live in, is it being ethical in making good decisions? Then again, does this not usually boil down to some individual's decision or a group of people whom agree upon a decision, a group of people that run the country, and not necessarily what the majority of the society think to be the right decision? This is the case a lot of times. Before anyone lectures me on third world countries and dictatorships, let me be very clear. No, I do not ever wish to live in a third world country nor a dictatorship. Dictators have always demanded some sort of allegiance or patriotism or nationalism from the people who live within it. In a first world country, this is your choice. In third world countries, there is usually some sort of collectivism or tribalist viewpoint that is often conflated to cultural patriotism. Along with this, there is also slave labor and lack of the freedom towards individuality. I consider myself a domesticated anarchist. And to me, living in the United States is just fine. The real reality is that anarchy is not sustainable unless the population size of the people is relatively small. Small enough to accommodate a lack of governing body. In today's day and age, there are, to be realistic, only a very small handful of the human population that could live in an anarchistic society peacefully. Since the population is not small, tribalism, even at a greatly reduced population, would be inevitable. In this sense, I am fine living in the United States because I am granted to have the freedom of a different political point of view, as long as I do not disrupt the system, and I am fine with this. The United States offers enough freedom for me not to rebel enough to the point of being seen as a hardened criminal. But this is also true for many European countries as well. In essence, I am sure I would have plenty of criticisms of almost any first world country. However, they would all allow enough freedom for me to be complacent and offer enough freedom, whereas I would not be considered a hardened criminal. Through this analogy, what difference would it really make as forth of what country or society one lives in, as long as it is accommodating enough to remain complacent? Sure, each country and society will come with its own list of complaints about it. But as long as it upholds the tenets of maximizing freedoms as much as possible, what difference does it truly make? I would not, let me be very clear on this. I would not advocate for anarchism, as the population is too large and not enough of the human species is mature enough to be completely unregulated. Anarchism should remain as a domesticated counterculture philosophy, as it would certainly result in tribalism and barbarism. It's fine to honor the idea, but not in actual practice. In actual practice, it would be a catastrophe. Because I know this will be brought up, even though at the beginning I specified this is not about economic theory. We must discuss capitalism. Capitalism is not a system of government. It is a monetary system in which to exchange and receive resources, i.e. food, water, things. This system was the result of learning that the system of barter and trade wasn't sufficient enough on the placement of value, especially when it comes to different working conditions, i.e. a loaf of bread is not worth the building of a house. Capitalism, the current system of commodity and commerce, is an evolved version of the barter and trade system. And I do not think there are any other alternatives to it, unless we somehow achieve a Star Trek society, but we are nowhere close to this at all. It's not to say that it's not impossible, just improbable. Even in communist and socialist countries, capitalism is still used. The only thing that really varies from one system of government to another concerning capitalism is the currency that is being used. Ultimately, the currency is resembled by other things such as agricultural products, corn, grain, sugar, chocolate, tea, and so on, or natural resources, oil, gold, drinkable water, iron, sulfur, diamond, silver, and so on. Industrial products and manual labor, cell phones, bread, plastic, electronic repair, art, and so on, and I think you get the point. Capitalism is merely a way to equally compensate, or at least should be compensated, based on amount of worth equally, which this is not always the case. I think there are people that do jobs that are extremely physically harmful and are highly underpaid. For example, if you bring up an economic system, just know capitalism would still probably exist, even in anarchy. For example, the prostitute is more than likely going to want equal compensation for having sex, depending on the gravity of the situation. You know, if she thinks you're repulsive and ugly, she has literally just performed a job, a task, a societal task for you, and deserves equal compensation for having to do that, which might be higher, and it might be, she might It might be free if she actually finds the person attractive and wants to have sex with the person. So rest assured, those out there that want to bring up my capitalism, there is not much alternative to it, and it really is just another name for a system of monetary compensation, just like the barter and trade system. So, in conclusion, there is nothing wrong with liking the country you are in and wanting to protect it, and especially the philosophy of maximizing freedoms, protecting that, and the people who live within the society, protecting them. Nationalism, though, is antithetical not only to maximizing freedoms, but also to true individualism and individual opinions, thoughts, and expression. Pure nationalism is void of rationality, logic, critical thinking, and reasoning. Nationalism can render a person from making critical opinions of their country and make monsters out of good people by following bad ideas. So, I want to add to this that one of the things I've been thinking about recently, too, is why haven't we thought beyond the means and confines of the social, political, and economic structures that we have? Trying to a lot of it has to do with the animals that we are. We are both, we are simultaneously territorial and social animals, making it very, very hard to create a society for us. We're pack animals, but we're also so that's the social side of us, but also very territorial, much like dogs. But if dogs were to create a society, it'd be much different because their brains are different than ours. They do not have the emotional spectrum that we do. Their brains are almost constantly amped up on dopamine. It's like they're constantly on antidepressants. I could bring up the example, though, like, what if reptiles were the ones that had adopted a larger cerebral cortex and frontal lobe? Communism and socialism wouldn't even be a thing. I don't even know if they would be able to create what we know as society. They are not social. They are cannibalistic, loners. They're even known to eat their own young. So if they were the ones that had evolved these higher level thinking cerebral cortexes and frontal lobes, we would be looking at much different political philosophies, political and economic philosophies. If it were cats, let's say, cats are very interesting because the part of the brain that controls emotions is about the same size and shape as that of a human, to my understanding. It is speculated, it is theorized, that cats have the ability to experience the same emotional spectrum as human beings. However, they are social to a point, but they're not as social as we are. They are much more territorial, too. So the political philosophies, the social, political, economic philosophies, if a race of cats that had evolved a higher functioning cerebral cortex and frontal lobe came to dominate this planet, the social, political, and economic structures would then again look very, very different than the ones that we come up with. We have to come up with social, political structures that can accommodate to our need to be social, but also our need to desire private property and be territorial. It's a very complicated task. There's a line by Alien Sex Fiend that I think sums up the human condition in this very, very well. He says, everybody wants what everybody's got, and everybody got what everybody wants. And that is really, really difficult to come up with a social, political, economic theory that will satisfy everyone when really we kind of want it all. But that can't be done. It's the reason why communism falls flat on its face is because the real reality is that life competes for resources. This is Darwinian science. You can ignore this with Lysenkoism if you want, but unfortunately reality kicks in and people will compete for resources. Even Karl Marx admitted that his idea would not work unless there was an overabundant amount of resources available. So, but you could apply this to any known species, that if they were the ones that were to evolve these higher level cerebral cortexes and frontal lobes, the social, political, and economic systems and philosophies that they would come up with would be outside the perimeter of those that we come up with. The reason why we have a hierarchical structure in our government with, a leader is because ultimately we are tribalistic pack animals. But at the same time, we all want to be the leader. This is not the same behavior that we see in the canine species. They don't all want to become the leader. They become submissive to the leader. And it's just well understood. Human beings are a little bit different. So coming up with that is very, very difficult, and I wouldn't be surprised if another species had risen to the kind of power level that we have, that you would see things beyond socialism, beyond communism, beyond National Socialism or fascism, beyond that of monarchy and aristocracy and oligarchy, beyond that of tribalism and feudalism. You might see some of those things, but you might see ideas that go beyond things that we can't even fathom. You might. There might not be any alternative than what we have on the table, but that's where I look at this as the reason why we don't have any alternatives other than the ones that are on the table and the ones that are known is because of the type of species that we are. And I started thinking, well, not every species has the same behavioral or social social behaviors that human beings do, that primates have. So there may be other political philosophies out there that we cannot fathom because we're not reptilian, we're not birds, we're not amphibians, we're not cats, we're not dogs. Pick your species. And look at their social behavior and magnify it to the level that we live in. Because when we look at species like the bonobos and chimps, other primate species, a lot of their social behavior is extraordinarily parallel to us. It's so close, in fact, you can almost understand them without language. It's that unspoken body language that's universal across culture, across country. It doesn't matter. It's things like that. Like you know what like a stare is when somebody is sexualizing. You know what that looks like. That's not something that you if you speak English, and let's say you're talking to you're in a room with somebody that does not speak English at all, and they don't understand you, you don't understand them, but you think they're attractive, and you look at them that way. You don't need to understand each other's language to understand that. You don't need to speak each other's language to understand when somebody is showing off and showboating. You don't need to speak each other's language to understand affection and compassion. These are universal. You don't need to speak each other's language to understand boredom and depression. These are things that we just understand. It's instinctual. Like, I don't think cats would have a concept of fairness. I think private property would be a big issue in a feline society. That would be a hot button topic for them. Lizards might very well only be able to live in an anarchistic society. Who knows? But I want you guys to think about that and be aware of that. The social, political, and economic structures that we come up with have been invented because of the animal that we are and the social behaviors that we possessed before we even got here. So we may be looking at as good as it gets. And with that, I think I'm going to finish. I believe in choices, not one's ability to impose one's will on others against their own will. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit the bell button on any channel you're subscribed to, and please feel free to let me know what you think in the comments section below.